Okay, so now we have some more 50-50 plaster stone mix, and we're gonna start investing our lower case. And I'll just add some water to this. And again, we're looking for a somewhat creamy consistency that upon final spatulation, you want a creamy consistency that the mix holds its weight. Notice there that if you need to add a little bit more water, that I don't take it over the sink. I can just wet my spatula a little bit. Quite often, just a little moisture is sufficient to give you the right ratio. You can certainly measure it, but I think over time, a good eye goes a long way. So about 30 seconds of spatulation over the vibrator to make sure that we have a nice mix. Certainly we can move these out of the way, we don't need them. Thank you to my cameraman. Dispense some stone on the lower half. Vibrate it all the way to the bottom. Maybe a little bit too much, I can take some out. All the way to the edges. And now, I can take my model and somewhat rock it, vibrate it into place like so, and I bottomed out and I kept it fairly leveled. I'm going to take my font stock for now and vibrate some material in here, enough to cover the little projections that I created for the lingual reinforcement, and make sure we cover it pretty thoroughly with at least maybe 2-3 millimeters of stone coverage on top of it. Now, if I had gone a little bit lower with these retention prongs here, the less stone I have to use. So keep that in mind when you're working on cases. The higher you make them, the more coverage you need to have with your stone. And it becomes more difficult. Imagine now this wax is going to get boiled out. A, it becomes more difficult to boil the wax out, and B, it becomes difficult to separate the case and pack the case. So you can't have those projections too high off the model floor, so to speak. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to pick up my flask now very carefully, and now start moving the stone plaster mix around to make sure that we block out all the undercuts and certainly not create any. Just gently vibrate it. I have more than enough that I need right here. I'm going to take a little bit from here, which is excessive, and bring it over here. Kind of move it around. Take a little bit from here. I can certainly go back into my bowl and pick some up, but I have more than I need right here. Block out all of the facial undercuts on the model. And this is the area of concern right in here. I want to make sure that I put plaster stone mix between my little retentive tag, acrylic retentive tag, and the wax up itself, and cover the rest of the wire as much as possible, like so. I'll go back and reshape that in a bit, and I'll do the same thing on this side. So quite often I'll use the bench, or I'll use the back of my hand just to wipe off the instrument that I'm using, and I prefer the font stock for this procedure, or for any investment procedure for that matter, because I find it very useful in terms of its shape. Take a little bit of plaster here and put it there and shape it and block out the undercut here around the arm. And I'll do the same thing on the inside. I got a little bubble coming through here, but it seemed to have settled out. Nope, it's still there. Just tapping the little extensions here. For some reason I'm getting a little bubble here. Just trying to cover. Take a little bit of stone here and apply it to here. So now the stone is starting to set. It's been about 5-6 minutes now that I can actually start carving the stone instead of displacing it around. So now I can wipe off a little bit of my instrument, carve the outside first to expose the ledge of the flask, wipe off the excess against the bench or the back of your hand. I'm going to expose the ledge of the flask all the way around. And I realized a little void in here. I don't know if you picked that up. That's okay. You can just go back and kind of vibrate that in a little bit. Just fine. Okay, so once I've exposed the outer edge of the flask, still getting a little air pocket trapped in there that's trying to come through. Go back and carve the excess away into a tapered finish to ensure that we don't create undercuts now through our investment. Careful with the tip of your instrument not to scratch your wax up. Back here. Sure you expose, there's a little flat part of the ledge of the flask at the front. Make sure you expose that completely. This area here. Some flasks have it, some don't. Okay, now we're going to go over to the sink and smooth out our investment. Again, we're going to clean off the ledge here so it's free of any plaster stone mix, and then gently, this one's a better timing. I've had better timing with this one, so it's a little harder for me to smooth out, so I don't have to wait for it. Just gently go over it with your fingertip. Clean off some of the flash here. Get in there as much as you can. Doesn't have to be all the way, but at least if we can get a smooth finish for most of the investment would be ideal. Clean off the little holes here and make everything as smooth as possible. Notice that I used the lower flask designated for the lower model. You can see it has this angle on it in relation to the base to accommodate the height of the retromolar pads. But if you happen to reverse them by mistake, it's not the end of the world, it'll still work. Just trying to get rid of this little bubble in here. That's good. Okay, that seems to be okay. Once again, you can verify that you have adequate height for the other upper flask. You can see here there's enough height here that the teeth are well below the height of the flask. The lid clearly closes, as well as this one, although this one we came pretty close, I would say, but nevertheless, there's enough height on the upper half of the flask for the lid to close. So on the next video, we'll do the second half of the investment, and there's a couple of more videos to come to that. Okay.